In this chapter, we'll be going over two methods of retopology. Retopology is changing the topology, or the geometry, of an object by projecting it onto another object. For example, if we wanted to wrap this text around the sphere behind it, we would use a method of retopology to project the vertices of the text onto the surface of the sphere. So each of these individual vertices will be projected backwards onto the surface of the sphere behind it. Retopology is especially useful when you need to cut a hole in a curvy surface. I'll show you how to do that later in this chapter. Let's start with the basic methods. There are actually two methods. The first method is to use a modifier called shrink wrap. So select the text, and in the Object Modifiers tab, add the modifier shrink wrap. In the Target field, select the sphere as the target, and you'll already see a result. To get things just right, we'll need to change the mode from nearest surface point, which gives you a more typical shrink wrap result, to project, so that the text projects directly backwards. Enable negative in the direction, so the text can project in either direction, and you'll see now it's flush up against our sphere. Each of the vertices was projected onto the surface, deforming the text around the sphere. Now we'll be using this method later on for the front grille of the car. Let's learn a different method now. I'm going to delete that modifier, and in the header of the 3D view, I'm going to enable the snapping icon, which is the little magnet. If you enable that and move the text around, you'll see that it's snapping to the grid right now and moving around in increments. We need to change the Snap To element, which is the menu next to it, from increment to face. Now we have to enable one more thing. At the end of these menus is a little sphere with a blue square. The tooltip reads, project individual elements on the surface of other objects. That means in edit mode, when we move this and project it onto the sphere behind it, each individual vertex will be moving individually and be projected onto the surface. So now in front view and in edit mode, select all of the vertices, press the G key, and then press enter without moving it. Any transformation will activate the snapping. So now each of those vertices was projected back onto the surface of the sphere. Now let me show you how to cut a hole in the sphere. Now that we know the methods, we're going to use the same method. We're going to start from scratch. So I'm going to reset all of these tool options. So in the header, I'm going to deselect that icon on the end. I'm going to change the snap element back to increment, and I'm going to turn off the magnet icon. So back to default settings. Now in front view, I'm going to add a circle and move it in front of the sphere, and I'm going to squish it like that. Now this is the shape of the hole that I want to cut into the sphere. What I'm going to do is simply project this back onto the surface of the sphere. Then I'm going to join the two objects together. I'm going to delete the faces of the sphere that are inside of the border of the hole, and then I'm going to face the gap around it. Another and maybe easier way to do this is to use the Boolean modifier. However, in some cases this may produce some undesirable facing that's pretty tedious to clean up. So in some circumstances, I like doing this manually. So we have the shape of our hole. In front view, in the 3D header, enable the magnet icon, change the Snap To element to face, and enable that icon on the end with the little blue square. Press G, then enter. Make sure it's flush against the sphere. Disable snapping, because if you continue to move this around with snapping enabled, you'll see it'll stick to the surface of the sphere still. And now we have what looks like a half moon, which is actually pretty cool. Let's stick with that. So now we're going to cut a half moon into the sphere. So disable snapping, and get out of edit mode. Select these two objects and press Ctrl and J to join them. And in front view, I'm going to hide half the sphere so that we're just working with the half that we're putting a hole in. So now go through, select all of the vertices that are inside of that hole, and start deleting them. Now all we have to do is add faces in all of those gaps. And there, we cut a pretty decent hole into that sphere. Now we can do something like extrude that in. And add an edge split modifier to make sure we have a sharp edge. I don't know why you would need to, but if you ever need to cut a moon-shaped hole into a sphere, you know how to do it now. We're going to be using this method later on to cut a hole in the side of the car for the gas cap. And that's it for this chapter.